September 2023. It is 7:01. Before we start the meeting, please can any members or officers in attendance with an electronic device mute it to avoid feedback. And to guests, I can see you're all doing it anyway, but I'm going to read this out. To anyone attending remotely via Teams, please could you keep your camera and microphone off unless you wish to speak, and ideally not use the camera at all, as this can affect the quality of the meeting. Please be advised that this meeting may be recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. In addition, the recording may be added to the Council website. If any councillors are accessing the meeting remotely, it is advised that you use your Swale or KCC laptop to participate. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile or tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as in remote attendance. Please can members speak loudly and clearly into their microphones and switch their microphone off after speaking to enable remote participants to hear the next speaker. Welcome to any councillors and members of the public joining us remotely this evening, Bob, Maria and Samuel. And in addition to the members of the committee, we have the following officers in attendance with us this evening, who very pleasingly for me are sat in the order that they are on my sheet and are in alphabetical order. Head of Environment and Leisure, Martin Cassell, Climate Change Officer, Janet Hill, and Green Spaces Manager, Graham Tuff. Welcome. Please be advised that no fire drill is planned this evening. If the alarm sounds, those in attendance should leave via the exits indicated and assemble outside where directed. Do not use the lift. If anyone in attendance requires extra assistance, please make yourselves known. We're all good. Do we have any apologies for absence this evening or substitutes, Philippa?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Julian Speed, who is substituted by Councillor James Hunt, and also from Councillor Angie Rowles, who is substituted by Councillor Ashley Wise. Thank you.
And apologies for me for missing you off of my officers list a minute ago. And also I've heard from Chris Williams that he's running late, but he will be here. Are there any declarations of interest relating to any item on the agenda this evening, other than the fact that biodiversity is important for our future habitable planet? No, good. And are we okay to approve the minutes from the meeting on the 29th of June? Great, thank you. Moving on to item 5, biodiversity. Would you like to open this one, Martin?
Thank you, Chair. I think you all know me, but Martin Cassell, Head of Environment and Leisure. I'm going to do the introduction to this, and then I've got Janet and Graham to answer details as well. So this report is slightly different. So the ones that we've seen mainly at the Environment Committee have been around decisions, contract awards, policy awards, things like that. But certainly one of the functions of the committee is around scrutinising some of the activity that we're doing as well. And so this report feels more around that sort of scrutiny function of the committee. It was something that was requested by a committee member in previous committees, and I'm pleased to be able to bring you what I hope is the start of a good discussion around biodiversity and the actions that we're undertaking. So what the report and the documents that we've linked in it hopefully does is set out the key policies and documents. So they cut across numerous elements of the council. Tonight you've got some of my team here, but it cuts across planning and other departments as well. Certainly Swale Borough Council is not the only custodian of biodiversity in the borough as well, and other agencies are super important in making sure our borough is as biodiverse as possible. And the report then goes on to discuss some of the details of the work and the projects that we're doing, either directly as a council or in partnership with those organisations and agencies. It sets out some of the responsibilities that we have, and as I say, says how we're operating in the current in the current process and under what policies and documents we're operating under. So really tonight, an opportunity for you guys to ask questions, make comments around whether the policy direction is in the direction that you want it to be going, and certainly take on board any recommendations. So I'll happily pass to the floor, Chair.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. On the open space one, provision for children and young people, it says about a teenage shelter. Can you tell me how many are in the borough and where they're actually situated?
Probably built them all.
So we have a number throughout the borough. Whether I can recall where all of them are is another thing. But certainly Faversham Recreation Ground, Windermere Open Space, the Grove Park in Sittingbourne, Kemsley Recreation Ground, Rushendon Hill on the island. They're the ones that I can immediately remember. I suspect that there are probably more, but again, I can provide you with a listing if you would like that.
Yes, I wondered, are they expensive? Because I don't ever see anything in St Anne's.
They are. I'm not quite sure how it's linked to biodiversity, though. It points to the strategy that talks about biodiversity and other areas, but I'm not thinking that the topic is around biodiversity tonight and not children's play. That's a community committee responsibility.
I've got another question, if you don't mind. Trees, which is biodiversity. Tree planting, I can see it's on page opportunities and benefits. Obviously, I know that trees are good for the environment, etc., and you aim to plant extra trees. It's the maintaining of the trees that concerns me, because we have got trees that are planted in residential areas, and to get them pruned back, it's a never-ending game. Would you like to make a comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Referenced in the report is obviously some of the strategies that govern how we work. So the tree maintenance policy explains the priority that we make in terms of the limited hours that we have in order to do that. So there inevitably in anything needs to be a prioritization of some works over other works. But we buy, I think it's 40 full days of tree maintenance activity a year, so just around one a week. So again, it's about that limitation, but certainly done on a priority basis, and absolutely fed by resident and councillor intelligence in terms of the issues.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I agree that the biodiversity is important, and when we read everything that's on the report, it all sounds brilliant what we're doing. The problem is a lot of it we're not actually doing. It's all in there. It says it's all really good stuff that's being achieved. But some things just don't seem to match up. The open spaces policy ran out last year. The tree policy runs out this year, and I haven't seen what work has been done. But if we're talking about biodiversity being so important, I just wonder why we're not having these policies that are really part of it being looked at sooner. Rather than policies being running out, we should be looking at it a year or so in advance and having it ready to go, rather than doing that. And I think probably the answer to that is haven't had time to get these things done. which just brings me on, if we haven't got time to do the policies, how have we got time to even carry out the things that we've got in the policies? Because that's what happens when we look through this. It's saying in there about the planning system is helping. One of the ones it says at 2.7, the notable projects or achievement of biodiversity gains through planning system, notably Stones Farm and Iwade. I know developments in Iwade that haven't even had any of the biodiversity measures for that development delivered at all. There's pieces of scrubland that should be planted up and managed that isn't being. It's saying how good we've got with parks and recreation grounds, and again, there's one in Iwade hasn't even been managed properly by the developer. Hasn't been handed over to the borough council, and the reason why is because the planning department haven't got time to do the enforcement, and it takes so long. So there's things that we're saying are good, but we can't deliver on them. It's talking about the new recommendations and that may influence future decisions on grass mowing, but we've just renewed the grass cutting contract. So if we're now starting to look at what can be done in the future, when is actually that going to be? Because if we've just done a grass cutting contract, how do we make these changes that we need for biodiversity now? Or are we looking at 5-10 years time when it's probably going to be too late anyway? And that is just a theme that's running through it. There's lots of examples on the action pad on page 14. Establish a baseline for trees, but again, I know in the Meads, Moonstone Square has had dead trees for years. I raised it at full council back in January and was told at the time by the chairman of the Environment Committee that they'd get them planted, still haven't been done. So if we can't even get 9 trees planted, we can do 2,500 trees in country parks, but we're not looking after the small spaces that we've got, which could make a big difference all across the borough. And it goes on with encouraging coppicing of council woodlands. That's not being done. We want to promote forest and beach schools, and Graham will know we've been trying with property to get some land at the Meads Woodland for the Aspire School. That's been over a year now. And again, officers haven't got time to push these things forward. So, and support Swale in Bloom, but we had a coordinator in post that is no longer there because the funding's not there. So the general theme that I've picked up on it is we can say all this stuff, but we need to be making sure we can actually deliver it and in a time frame that we actually need to be able to do it.
Thank you. Quite a lot of points there. Do you want to start responding to those?
Hopefully
Martin?
one general thing, but lots of bits in there.
Yeah.
I'll start, and I'll start by generally agreeing. We would absolutely love to be doing everything we possibly can on it, but it will take more resources to be able to do that. So I don't think we should apologise for having the aspiration of doing the right things, because what that does is that drives the intention to do a number of these projects. Without these aspirations, the projects listed wouldn't be happening. So again, will we achieve everything in the action plans? Not immediately, but what it does is gives us the incentive and the strategic direction to be able to try and move some projects along. So if I answer the why the policies are expiring, I'm not a great lover of policies with dates, because I think what that does is it spuriously gets you to review them at a particular point, whereas actually the type of open space and how we manage and maintain it probably hasn't changed in many years, or probably hasn't needed to change. Because the processes and procedures have been working. So I'm not immediately concerned by a policy that is close to expiry or coming to expiry if the principles within that policy are still workable and relevant to the current operation. So this committee, and I apologise because it's clearly a different makeup to the previous one, but pre-committee, this committee did see the open space and play strategy and gave us the guidance that they wanted for us to go off and do that work in order to bring it back to this committee. And I think it's on the forward plan. If it's not, then I apologise. But it's so it is due to come back, and we are working on those principles that the Environment Committee previously told us to do. The same with the tree maintenance policy. For me, that one doesn't concern me because I think it is about presenting a similar approach. We are constrained by the resources we've got, and therefore that policy is set around the resources and the constraints that we've got. The new GM contract, I think you're absolutely right. Yes, we have just let it. What we did do, it's only a 5-year contract, so it expires in January 27. So before we know it, we will be starting to formulate plans. And actually, I would imagine it being on this committee's work programme within this 4-year cycle in terms of determining the next approach to that. But what we did do is build in the ability to have different maintenance regimes on our grass. So we've built in the ability to have wild cuts and rough cuts and change areas of land. So where a grass is currently cut within an inch of its life, because that's the way we've always done it, we've given ourselves the ability to add those changes into the contract. So we have future-proofed a bit on that. The only one I would flatly disagree with is coppicing, because we do a huge amount. We have lots of wood that we sell on the basis of that as well, and that we do operate on management plans that encourage that coppicing. So certainly in the key areas of woodland and the country parks, that is happening. I'm probably going to look to Graham to see if he's got anything to add on any of those points. And apologies if I've missed anything.
The only one other thing that I would pick up on is you mentioned the trees at the Meads, so I could do with the detail of those to make sure that we do pick up on them. I'm not sure that I've seen that in the past, but I'll email.
Yeah.
Did you want to come back on one of those points?
Yeah, if that's okay. I think on the coppicing, I can only comment on what I know from the Meads, and the Meads woodland, I don't remember any coppicing being done within that. That's obviously there's work being done now with the Friends group, and we'll sort of try and look at some of the trees, but I can only sort of comment on what I am aware of. But I just think, having heard all of that, I think maybe the committee will consider having a look of actually more detail. These things are actually being looked at, because I agree that we want to start having an aspiration of doing something. But if there's so much stuff on there that actually is other people, say other departments for planning, that can't do it, we need to be making sure that if we're going to list things on there, we actually can deliver it at all. And maybe if we are a bit short of resources, actually this committee looking to see what is the priority and what we can actually work on to actually get things delivered, and maybe take some of the bits off that we can't do.
Thanks for that, as noted. I will say from my own experience, as Graham knows, at Perry Wood, we get complaints that too much wood is being cut there. So yeah, it goes both ways. Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Chairman. And first of all, to say I agree pretty much with everything that my colleague has said. A couple of points. One of our greatest sort of resources is Barton Point. It doesn't appear in this report anywhere. It's got a massive biodiversity claim, if you like, on our resources, and it's not mentioned. And I think it should be. And I think, just to make a point, we've wasted a year this year by not getting the contract sorted out with people to run it and to make it work for the people of Sheppey and the economy of Sheppey. And I think that's been a real shame. but it does deserve a mention. It's huge, bigger than not quite as big as Milton Country Park, but bigger than most things, and it's not even mentioned. I do welcome the whole long grass thing, you know, that's very much in line with KCC's Plan B to keep verges in the best state we can keep them for our pollinators, and I think that's worked well. So I'd congratulate those involved in that. I do find, however, when Blenwoods are now going around cutting them, the mess that is left behind in terms of litter is an eyesore. And no one is going around after the grass cutters have been in. No one seems to be going around clearing up the tin cans and the milk bottles and anything else that's been thrown, that's been hidden by the long grass. And I would hope that perhaps Martin could get on Blenwood's case with that. And my final point, Chairman, is one. I get slightly tired of officers telling us they haven't got the resources to do what we want them to do. So my question is, for this committee, what demands are we going to make of P&R for resources next year to do what the officers want to do? Because there is no point at all in us having policies that says we're going to keep the grass 2 inches short, but we haven't got the money to make the grass 2 inches short. We've got a whole range of policies, and each comes with a cost. At the end of the day, somebody says to us, sorry, we would have loved to have done that, but we haven't got the cash. We would have loved to have done that, but I haven't got the manpower. Loved to have done that, but we haven't got the machinery. So at what point in the budget cycle are we going to identify our priorities as an environment committee and put those priorities to P&R and say, actually, do you know what? We need another £1 million. Or we need another 10 bodies, or we need this or that. Otherwise, we can't deliver anything. And next year, Martin will be in the sad position, as he is now, of saying, I'd love to do all this, but you know what? I can't. Because you, councillors, haven't given me the money to do it. And I think that is a serious question as a service committee, and all service committees should be asking themselves, and particularly us, because I think the environment issues that we raise here are extraordinarily important. And to leave the officers high and dry without the resources to do what we asked them to do is wrong. So there was a couple of questions in there to start with, and the last point was more a political statement, but hopefully, Chairman, you will take that one away, and that we can at some point come back in line with what Councillor Hunt said, come back with our priorities and what it is we want to actually fund, and by way of a council tax ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Just responding on that point about funding, obviously we all saw that one of the possibly the largest local authority in Europe went under a couple of days ago. Every council in the land is in a very tight financial position at the moment, and whilst we can go and ask for more money to fund more projects, that needs to be balanced with the other services that the council needs to provide and the ongoing financial stability of the council itself. Councillor White, Worcester, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously, decent central funding might obviously be a good start for that sort of thing. And the question I want to ask is a rather more positive element, please, which is during the report, I identified several ways that the team were looking at partnership opportunities through biodiversity. I think that's really key to look at. And whereas a massive statement, I'm going to keep my question to a question, which is, Looking at your three key areas, so you've looked at partnerships, obviously with your own assets, so your own contractors. Great partnership with, I think, Kent University, and also you've had a little look at partnerships with other land owners as well. Is there anything we can identify, because that's an area that could potentially cost very little money, but have a massive impact in sharing our skills base of biodiversity that we've already been very, very proactive with in the last 4.5 years, that we could be sharing with the likes of golf courses, schools, and other large land providers or small land providers that cost very little money. Thank you.
Can we just get a response from Martin to Councillor Whiting's points first, please?
Thank you, Chair.
So absolutely agree with you on point one, Barton's point, jewel in the crown. We certainly feel so. We've done a lot of investment there recently. We've taken the opportunity of not having lots of people there to be able to embed lots of new things. So you should see new trees that have been planted. There's new interpretation panels that are going in, thanks to levelling up funding, parks funding for that. So we've also restored a lot of the banks around the lake with that funding. Again, all with a view to biodiversity. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not mentioned, but we love it. It's a key site for us. It's right up there in terms of biodiversity. You only have to go there and see all of the ecology, you know, the wildlife and everything that on that site and the golf course next door. And it's a fantastic site from the ecological point of view. So 100% agree. I might pass maintenance and litter to Graham. On your last point, I think Councillor Lehman said it. You're always going to hear from me, Councillor, that I need more. I think you wouldn't expect me to say anything else, but I do understand clearly that there are other priorities across the council as well. I think the point I was trying to make was that doesn't mean we shouldn't write it in a document, that we want to do it, because that will help remind us that we need to keep going back to that. So when we get to the budget setting process, I can be saying, I need X to do Y, or I need this to do that. So it doesn't mean we shouldn't write it in a policy or a strategy. And I get it. Sometimes what that means is it's frustrating when it looks like, well, we can't do that this year, but we might be able to do it next year. So, you know, that's all I would say on that.
Sharon, I'm really grateful for Martin's response. And I'll let the rubbish go for now and leave it with you, Graham, to talk to Blenwoods. This is why I come to try to help Martin, because we can have a dozen policies. And when he goes into budget setting meetings with SMT, he needs to know what our priorities are, coming back to Councillor Hunt's point. And if we've got a dozen schemes, which ones are you going to go and bat for? So I do think we can help Martin, not by saying take them off the list entirely, keep them there, keep them in the forefront of our minds, but give him some idea about which is the most important, so that when he goes into bat for the funding he needs, he can do so knowing he's got the confidence of the committee behind him.
I agree. Did you want to answer Councillor Worcester's points, Janet? Thank you.
Thanks for your question. There's 3 projects that we're involved with at the moment around biodiversity, which are not costing us anything other than a bit of my time. We're working with KWT on a 3Cs project around coastal resilience, and that's looking at salt marsh restoration on sites either side of the swale. So there's a whole load of partners in that, but led by KWT. We've just got the second round of funding down for that. There should be another round of funding. KWT have done very well to get it. It's been massively oversubscribed, that funding pot. You might see it referred to as the Adonis Blue. That's the new name for the consultancy arm of KWT. So if you see the word Adonis Blue, which is the little butterfly that's on their logo, that's It's another name that they're operating under. We're also doing some early work with Peel Ports. The dredging material that comes out of the Medway and Swale at the moment goes a long way offshore to be dumped. Uses a lot of time, uses a lot of diesel. It's been found that the actual material is good for salt marsh restoration again. So they're looking to put it on sites in the Medway and Swale. And we were out actually on Monday looking at, there's a great big long list, and there's 4 on the short list, and one of them is actually Swale. Been looking at those. So that's early days, and the commission process, putting that dredging material there, is a very long, slow process, but it's starting. Again, that's not costing us anything. So there'll be seagrass and saltwater restoration there. And then it started as 2 farmers, one either side of the Swale, and they formed a cluster of like-minded people. And this farming cluster has grown from 2 farms to 27 at the last count. It may have increased since then. They've already got some sites set aside for biodiversity net gain that they're prepared to, when developers are going to be required to do net gain work. Should start in November. We've not got the definite details from the government yet. They've got some sites near Battlesmere that have already been identified. These farmers are working on improving their own estate, but also bring up land for other people to be able to invest when they need to. So all those projects are going on at the moment at no cost to us.
Brilliant. And just to obviously point out that obviously that's the other point about biodiversity, is that it obviously does sit as a standalone subject, but we can see so many points of council work where biodiversity needs to be inbuilt into the system, like the amazing progress that active transport has been pushing itself quite naturally forward, both nationally and locally. So whereas, yes, we do need to make sure that we are resourced and we are taking that, but it's very important that biodiversity underpins Swale's work, and I'm sure hopefully the chair will agree with me that rather than it being such a standalone project, it needs to be considered very much as an inbuilt part of the council's work. And I felt that has happened over the last 4.5 years, of which I'm sure the coalition is very proud.
Thank you. I've Councillor Paul Stephen, and then it will be Councillor Wise, Councillor Palmer, and Councillor Sarah Steve.
Thank you, Chair. We've mentioned quite a few areas that we can make improvements on, and obviously the planting of trees and leaving the grass to grow that little bit longer, and wilding, all great projects. But we've got an element of great potential in the fact we've got hedgerows. Now, these are far more efficient at reducing our carbon footprint than trees, mainly because they're exactly where the emissions are set on the roadside. They are extremely good at it, and they're also good for the wildlife. They help with flooding from the fields onto the roads, and they dispose of the carbon dioxide most efficiently, more efficiently than anything else. And really, we don't own them. This is the landowner's responsibility. And I know in a lot of the country lanes, they've got to cut it back to make sure that they don't encroach on the width of the road, which is essential. And because I've seen some country lanes where you could get 2 cars down there, and they can only just get 2 bicycles down there, So yes, we can't stop them from doing that. But what we can do, and I've witnessed this personally, is let them grow a little bit taller. I think the minimum height for a hedgerow is 2 meters, if I'm not mistaken, and a certain thickness. Now, obviously, where that thickness protrudes out onto the public road system, we've got to reduce it. But the other side of the hedgerow, on the land that it's actually situated on, could be left a little bit longer. And I know that they shouldn't be cutting them between March and the 1st of September because of the birds nesting. And we've actually stopped a farmer, well, it was a school actually, it was doing it. And we have stopped them from doing it. They weren't happy about it. We got a nasty email, and when I told them exactly what they should and shouldn't be doing, it was left. And at the moment, it hasn't been cut. Now, it's not going to cost us anything. We've got a lot of it. But the problem comes is when developers turn up, what's the first thing to disappear? Hedgerows. Once the hedgerows out the way, they think they can do anything. I think we need a policy, and I would say it's policies that we're looking at, is that we can preserve them and maintain them and encourage the owners of these hedgerows to let them grow just that little bit thicker, higher, and so they're more dense, and it's more natural. We're trying to trim everything, like we cut the grass green, you know, it's very low. They're great for a golf course and football pitches, but the surrounding areas don't need it. I mean, my grass, I don't think I've cut it, which is great because you haven't got to do it too often. I keep it trimmed, just trim it around the edges and keep it a reasonable height, and it's working, it's still green. And so I've changed the way I do it. And I think it's not hard for owners, farmers, schools, whatever, to do exactly the same. It won't take much, and I don't think it'll cost us a great deal. We just have to liaise or encourage these landowners not to be so drastic with their cutting. It will save them money as well. And I'm aware that the government has now got a policy regarding hedgerows, and we should be following up and mirroring that, or encouraging it, or imposing, you know, making sure it's happening. I don't know how much it's going to cost, but I don't really think it's going to be a great amount. But it's an asset that we need and we could look after, and it would be so biodiverse. And I hope that we can get something done in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that one, Martin?
If I start, but Graham's more likely to. It sounds like nobody's going to be as hedgerow expert as Councillor Stephen, but I'm going to defer to Graham in a minute. What I would pick up is from the strategic part of that is clearly what I think what you're saying is our policies need to be there to encourage and protect. Now, planning policy is key to that. Obviously, that's in development and bound by the legislation that you referred to. But there's nothing to say, like you say, it's not us going out and doing it for them, but there's nothing to stop the council going on an education or an information campaign on social media saying, do you own hedgerows that front things? If so, consider these 5 things. And you can do things like that for all, you know, not no resource, but limited resource. So I think it is about us being, and it touches on it in the report, about us being the stewards for the borough. It was definitely in the last corporate plan about that that exemplar and that steward for environmental elements within the borough. So we can influence others. I 100% agree with you. In terms of how high is a hedge and how deep's a hedge, I'm looking in that direction.
Hedge is a hedge. I think that, you know, the interesting thing is that, you know, what you've almost said is that hedges should be a priority. So that's something that, you know, obviously was the aim of this discussion, was to try to pull out sort of some of your priorities and thoughts around the different documents and everything. Yes, we can sort of try to do better in terms of our hedges. You know, from a direct point of view, we can plant more and maintain in a slightly different way, as has been suggested. And as Martin has said, it's the rest of the borough. It's very much about trying to influence. Obviously, there are things like the economics of farming, and that I'm sure there are other people far more confident around that. But you know, shading of crops, you know, so cutting on the inside is probably just as important to a farmer as cutting the outside is to the highways organisation. But then, you know, equally there are, as Janet's just sort of pointed out, sort of certain farms and different farmers out there that are accepting of biodiversity as a key part of their sort of farming strategy. So yeah, I can't disagree with anything that has been said, and it will just be interesting to see what different elements that we can pull out of a strategy that asks us to look at those and you know, in terms of trying to find ways to actually promote.
Can I just quickly come back? Thanks very much for that. I'm encouraged about the farmers and how many have got together now and wanting to be more biodiverse. I mean, I think this is an easy win. I mean, I realise that growing out into the field is going, but when you go around there, and I've been around a lot of fields, another foot is not going to do too much, but it's going to do a hell of a lot to reduce the carbon footprint. And I'm pleased that you're in agreement with that. But can we have it as part of the plan or part of something that would, I think, help greatly? And thank you very much.
Yeah, Janet.
I know also that farmers on it. And one of my colleagues deals with air quality, going to school. There is other air quality going on with school, but we're also, as part of that, mentioning that, you know, let your hedges grow and encourage the hedges outside school for air quality, but also for biodiversity. That's in hand.
Councillor Wise.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to start by addressing a previous contribution, I mean, sort of paraphrasing, but where's the money is a collective cry of local government right now, whatever the political leadership, and just about every other public service after the last 13 years. So we welcome everybody joining that chorus of where's the money, because we very much need it. But just coming back to some of the stuff outlined in this report, what are we sort of doing to learn from other local authorities? Because there are others who are a bit further along with some of their biodiversity plans, particularly when it comes to things like bee corridors, wildflower meadows, rewilding projects, or those sorts of things. What sort of learning can we get and ideas potentially as well from that? And also, I don't want us to sort of scale everything right back in terms of our ambitions and plans and proposals that might not be always met in year, because obviously the way the government sort of gives money to local government now is through various pots of money that local governments have to, you know, councils have to compete with one another to bid for. And it would be a shame if we then missed out when that comes around. Hopefully it won't be this government offering those pots of money in future, and we'll have a proper funding settlement under a different government in future. But all the while, that is the way it's sort of set up. We do need to have that, and it would be a shame to miss out because we didn't have stuff sort of on the shelf ready to go.
Again, if I start, I think these guys will have much more around the learning from other authorities. You know, hot off the press, I can say that we've got I can't think of what it is. It's not a guarantee, but it's a I can't think of the word. We've been given funding by the local authority tree fund for about £240,000 to increase our tree planting over the next 2 planting seasons. So I think it's a really valid point, Councillor Wise, because we need to be ready to bid and accept for those amounts of money. That will lead to well over 300 standard trees, so mature trees being planted, and 15,000 whips and smaller trees as well over the next 2 planting seasons. So we're really pleased to have got that. We've just got to fill out some final paperwork to sign on the dotted line, I think, to secure that. So that's really good news and absolutely matches the point that you said. I think learning from other authorities is key as well. We can't do everything. and actually why do we expect to be the innovators in everything? If something's worked elsewhere, absolutely grab it. I'm part, and Larissa, as chief exec, chairs the Kent and Medway Environment Group, and I sit on that with her. And that's like-minded officers across the 13 boroughs and county council in Kent. And we do exactly that. We do those sharing of ideas. We even work together in clusters to try and bid for funding as well. So the chief execs are coming together to agree a number of climate projects that we can do, where maybe 3 or 4 authorities do the legwork and the others get the sharing from it, and then vice versa, another 3 or 4 will test something else and the others, get the learning on it. So there is that coming together, but I'm sure there's many more examples on the lower level from these guys.
Similar to what Martin's mentioned, the next tier down, we have a very strong Kent climate change network, which is officers like myself, colleagues in air quality, planning policy. We meet quarterly, but there's an awful lot of traffic between us in between times by email. We all tap into each other's knowledge, and again, if we know that somebody's doing something, we share all that information. KCC do have biodiversity staff. I don't think any other local company's actually got a paid dedicated officer, but we can tap into that KCC resource, and I know planning policy are working very closely with the KCC biodiversity officer around policy development. So yeah, we're learning Kent-wide. There are bigger national networks that we can also tap into as well. Let's say the Kent been going for a long time, and then we've got the support at the higher level group that Martin sits on is driving the agenda as well.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. I'm a great believer in working together and jollying along together and supporting each other, but I really do feel as a new councillor that environment within Swale is a bit of an underdog committee compared to everybody else. As Councillor Stephen was saying about all the hedgerows, Richard and I personally have reported 4 cases of trees being cut down. We've reported hedgerows being ripped out before planning has even been approved. And in one case, it was still outline planning, and the gentleman who owns the land has pulled out loads of hedgerows, and he's cut down lots and lots of trees. And whilst the rural policing unit have been very helpful, the people at KCC have done a report damning what's been done. I feel a little bit from Swale that it's well, we're not really bothered because there's a planning application in and they might be being cut down anyway. What they've done, they shouldn't have done, and whether the planning is through or not, what they've done is wrong and it should be dealt with. And also, going back to the biodiversity stuff as well, we should be working more with KCC. They're doing all these cuts. Brogdale within Swale has done huge amounts working with schools for tree planting and all sorts of other work with youngsters. And it looks like their funding is going to be pulled. So a lot of what they offer for youth services and biodiversity is going to be cut right back. And I think as a charity, they've done a lot for Swale, and we should be fighting their corner to continue supporting them with KCC. Thank you.
I agree. As you probably are aware, that KCC's finances are in an even more precarious situation than ours. Did you want to come back on that, Martin?
I think I'm still on anyway. Apologies. Absolutely points that I can feed back to the relevant managers. In terms of that, I think it goes back to having that regular intelligence coming in from people, and then being able to follow it up with the relevant department resources. So yeah, I agree.
Councillor Sarah Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Taking up a point from Councillor Whiting, I attended yesterday my first ecological emergency steering group. I thought it was a really terrific meeting. We got a lot done. We were able to steer to the officers. So, you know, we are feeding in. There's only a few councillors on it, but I think the discussions were really productive, and that it's been obviously it's new to me, the actual steering group, but I think we can get a lot done and get these plans, like maybe the hedgerows, into what we're doing. And we've talked about a few items, I can't remember off the top of my head, of what probably isn't important now. So, and push up other things for Martin and the officers to follow up. So that steering group, I think, is absolutely valuable, really is, because you can't discuss everything in a committee. You need to be able to have a discussion out of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Worcester.
Sorry, Chair, I'm aware that standing orders say really we should only be speaking once on an item. I do apologise for this. Just thought I'd add to Councillor Stevens' point is that all parties do have a representative from each political party on that steering group. I know the opposition councillors couldn't make it for some reason. However, maybe that's the way to do it as well. So feed into your representative on that steering group so that they can potentially ask some of those questions for you, potentially.
Agreed. Anyone else have any? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for being late. I've got a couple of things that, whilst reading through the document, that I think is in some ways mentioned in there somewhere, but I think could be considered a bit further. A lot of the work that is very important in terms of biodiversity is very much community-based, that works alongside either with the council or in sort of individual circumstances. So whether that's community groups that work on private plots, but also the role that the home gardener, what people do in their own gardens, because after all, gardens make up a massive part of the landscape. And I think a really effective way, and I know it's things that we've done in Faversham with trying to encourage people to do more in their gardens and help keep that sort of flow going from public space into gardens as well. So I think that could be a very effective and not very expensive way of increasing biodiversity in a larger scale. And the other thing is the use of pesticides within the public air, well, within the environment in general. It really disheartens me sometimes when you see really big efforts to biodiversity gain within public spaces, and then you see pesticides being sprayed very close by, because it doesn't seem a very good logical thing to do next to each other. And I know that there's been a lot of work with Swale and the Green Space contract to try and remove pesticides or reduce them, which is brilliant. And I know KCC is something that they're looking at as well, but I think pesticides is definitely still an issue and something that's a problem, not just in the green spaces, but the waterways, everything that obviously affects biodiversity. So I think they're two things that I feel that are really quite important.
Martin?
Yeah, I think one of the key themes I'm hearing tonight is around our role in enabling and communicating and educating, and I think that's something coming loud and clear through this, and I think we can pick that up when we are looking to review the documents like the Climate and Ecological Emergency Action Plan, like the Open Space Strategy. Then I think education and that stewardship is a really good theme that I'm hearing tonight. In pesticides, yeah, absolutely agree. Hopefully legislation will come in at some point and force that even further. But at the moment, what you're seeing is the public sector trying desperately to reduce down and get that balance between the downside of the extra growth and detritus and various other things versus reducing down those pesticides. And as you know, that was That was a clear target in letting the new grounds maintenance contract to really ramp that down to 0 over the 5-year contract.
Councillor Whiting.
Thanks for letting me come back, Chairman. I'll just pick up on what Councillor Stevens said. We should be asking, as this committee, the things that we want to happen. So it might be good if formally we said to the planning team, protect our hedgerows in our local plan. When we're moving forward, I think everything that Councillor Stevens said has enormous weight and importance. And it might be good if we just send a message to the planning team, the head of planning and the planning chairman, to say, actually, what we want is this for these reasons. And we can do that. Now, I'm not sure how standing orders allow me to propose that, or I'd certainly allow Councillor Stevens to propose it and move it forward. But I do think that we have the ability to say to other committees on this council, we think this is important. We think you should consider it, and not just leave it to officers to go away and talk to each other. Just do it member to member. Happy to, I'll support whatever's proposed, but I really do think it's a really important move.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. It's interesting because that leads into the question that I was about to ask, which is that the recommendation, I'm new to this, chairing meetings, the recommendation here is to comment on the current biodiversity programmes and guide future direction, which is pretty obviously what we've done, but not really something to go forward. And the key themes that have come out of the discussion have been learning from other local authorities. Most importantly, I think work on determining priorities in order to effectively determine where funding is limited, what should be the priorities, enhancing focus on partnership working and protecting hedgerows. Are those things now, having been in the debate, recorded as an instruction for officers going forward, or do we need to formally recommend that those are things that we would like to?
Could I suggest, Chairman, that you formally recommend those things from the chair, and I think you'll probably get 100% support.
Thank you. Do I need to put this into a slightly more coherent wording than the one that I just gave, or can we determine that after the meeting?
As long as everybody knows what we're voting on.
Okay, I will try and repeat that in a. So the recommendation is to work on determining the biodiversity priorities in order for officers to be able to work effectively where funding is limited, to enhance our focus on partnership working to get more householders, charities and other stakeholders empowered and involved where possible. To, I think we're already doing this anyway, but I'd like to put it down anyway. Number 3, to learn best practice from other local authorities in these areas. And number 4, to request that far greater or as great as possible protection of hedgerows is included when the local plan is next updated. Does that sound okay? Councillor Hunt?
Thanks. I think also need to add something to it that can come back to this committee, because if there's a working group that's working on things and looking at what priorities there are, somewhere along the line, something needs to be fed back in to actually come back. If it may be planned already, but for what you've just said there, to make sure this is looked at again once those priorities are looked at.
Okay. Martin?
I'm going to throw it out there and you can tell me yay or nay. So every year we come to the Environment Committee with the annual report for the climate and ecological emergency. And within that, we can suggest changes to the action plan for the future years. We choose the top 10 priorities to go forward for projects to be happening. So if you were comfortable, it's already on the forward plan to come in November. Might be a bit quick turnaround, but what we can do is probably look to put a slightly more generic action within that captures those for us to be doing that work over the course of the following year, you know, next year, if you see what I mean.
Yeah,
Does that make sense? Sorry.
almost.
Yeah, but as long as it's not watered down.
Yeah.
So you've got four very clear priorities in your.
I agree. No watering it down, Martin. Do I have a seconder for those 4 recommendations? Councillor Sarah Stephen. Thank you. And all those in favour? Do I need to ask against if everyone voted in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Moving on, item 6 is the forward plan. Does anyone have any comments on the forward plan? As mentioned by Martin just moments ago, Climate and Ecological Emergency Annual Report 2023 draft is coming up in November. Oh, yeah. No comments? Good stuff. In that case, just one quick update from me. Many of you were here at the last Environment Committee meeting, and as you may know, one request I made of the committee was permission to write to the Cabinet Member for the Environment at KCC regarding the proposed closure of the household waste site at Faversham. I wrote to her on the 3rd of July with my concerns and asked 5 specific questions relating to various aspects of the closure, which I felt would hopefully provide a better case from KCC for the closure. Sadly, I've received a response which didn't answer any of those 5 questions. The consultation is currently on hold, but probably will come back, reopen later in the year. Whether Faversham is still in every single option they put forward remains to be seen, but just wanted everyone to be up to date on that. And if no one else has got any questions on that, we'll close the meeting at 8:03. Thank you. Thank you.